Welcome to This Week in Hastings Headline History, where we take a look back at what was making news in Hastings and St. Johns County, Florida, over a century ago. In this podcast, I'll share with you a few of the stories directly out of the pages of the Hastings Herald, which was published weekly in the early 1900s. So sit back and enjoy as I share with you some of the stories from January 1920. Success of Hastings drainage assured when bonds sold and money deposited. The final success of the Hastings Drainage District became an assured fact early this week when news was received that the bonds for the project had been sold and that money necessary for putting it through was safely deposited in the bank. One of the results is bound to be a decided rise in land values throughout this section. Regardless of whether or not any individual piece of property is directly affected by the drainage district itself, no piece of land can stand at a fixed valuation when other land all about is undergoing a rise. It is estimated, and outside interests appear to regard the estimate as conservative, that when the drainage system is complete, local land values will increase from 100 to 300%. Work on the construction of the Hastings Drainage District system will be started at once and rushed through to completion with as little delay as possible, was the decision reached at the meeting of the Drainage District. Upward trend of the potato market decidedly promising. The Market Reporter, the new official publication of the Department of Agriculture, in its description of the potato situation up to last Saturday, shows a decidedly promising trend of the market upward. The high prices of the few weeks just past are maintained, but in many instances increased. The summary of the general situation follows. Markets continue very active, with sharp gains in most producing sections. Average was 10 to 30 cents higher. Health officers after mosquitoes. If at any time during the next few weeks you chance to see a bespectacled old gentleman pursuing a terrified and shrieking mosquito across your back 40, don't get excited and send for the town marshal. The elderly gentleman will not be an escaped denzian from the nearest insane asylum, but merely a mosquito expert, making a study of our local mosquitoes to decide whether or not they are of the kind which carry malaria or yellow fever. The state health officer has decided that our present method of deciding the nature of mosquitoes in our vicinity is faulty. Ordinarily, when a mosquito bites us, we cuff him beside the ear, say a naughty word or two, and calmly await developments. If soon afterward we become afflicted with yellow fever, we know the mosquito which bit us was not a malaria carrier. But to improve our education in this line, Dr. H.I. Carter, a noted mosquito trainer, has been imported and is now in Jacksonville mapping out an itinerary for an inspection trip which he will make in the company with Dr. Ralph N. Green, State Health Officer. The two will institute extermination measures at all points where mosquitoes are prevalent and will also conduct an educational campaign to enlist the active cooperation of the citizens in each community. Ritter self-fastening containers are making a nationwide hit. J.R. Ritter, inventor of the Ritter self-fastening containers, has launched his sales campaign in earnest and reports that the new company is being favorably received in all parts of the country. Headquarters have been established in Jacksonville. The Ritter Self-Fastening Containers Company is of particular local interest, as Mr. Ritter has long been a resident of Hastings. So the great bulk of those interested in the company are Hastings people. The success of the company, which now seems assured, will mark one more success of products that in their origin were Hastings products. Visited wreck of the Isis. A number of motorists have followed the Crescent Beach Road down Anastasia during the last few days to visit the stranded government boat, the Isis. The boat, which is not a gunboat as was first erroneously reported, is beached out about 150 yards, and the work of salvaging is going on. The crew of the Isis and those in charge of the salvaging are camping on the beach, and all along the shore are seen the quantities of material, furnishings, etc. removed from the vessel. It is reported that the vessel was taking soundings in the vicinity of the submerged dredge, Florida, preparatory to placing a buoy there to warn craft of danger, when the Isis herself came to grief, staving a hole in the bottom. Now it's time for Talk of the Times, where I give you a glimpse of what people were thinking over 100 years ago. Have you ever listened to some of the advice from health officials and had to do a double take because it just didn't make sense? Well, that's what was happening this week back in 1920 in this editorial titled, Please Illustrate. It reads, "The state of health, which has sponsored many worthy and valuable ideas up to now, and which will undoubtedly give voice to many more in the future, occasionally issues a mandate which is so difficult of comprehension as to be worthy of an explanatory note. One such was issued in the board's recent collection of health hints. It was, in fact, the pronouncement to think before you sneeze. As good citizens, all of us are anxious to do the board's bidding in anything that is calculated to forward public health and welfare. But why should the board leave us hung up in the air with such an unfinished order as that? It is entirely incomplete and inadequate. What shall we think? How long a period preceding our expected sneeze shall we devote to thinking? Most of us have no advance warning when we're about to give voice to a rousing sneeze. We merely feel the inclination on the instant of its completion, so to speak, open our facial orifices to their fullest capacity and whoop her up. If we belong to the cultured classes and emit a gentle chew. On the other hand, if we are members of the great ordinary run of everyday human beings, we are far more likely to throw back our heads and startle the surrounding world with a yell that sounds like "Rouchoo!" In either event, however, it is doubtful if any of us have ever been in a habit of doing any advanced thinking. We often think after we have sneezed, and sometimes we think thoughts that, if they could be read, might startle the esteemed Board of Health, but thinking ahead of a sneeze is a new art which will require considerable explaining before many of us can practice it. The State Board of Health will please supplement its recent mandate by a chart illustrating the nature of the thoughts which must be thunk and the proper method of holding the sneeze in check while the thinking process is going on. I hope you enjoyed this week's edition of Hastings Headline History. This podcast was brought to you by Presenting the Past, bringing history back to the present through historic presentations and the sale of treasures from days gone by. This episode was written and produced by me, Michelle Murillo, with the aid of vintage copies of the Hastings Herald. Now it's time for this week's musical memory when we listen back to a song that everyone was listening to 100 years ago. This week brings us the vocal stylings of Eddie Cantor. He wasn't just a singer, though. He was an all-around entertainer. Cantor was a famous comedian, actor, singer, and songwriter. Quite a series of accomplishments for a man who had very humble beginnings. Eddie was born in 1892 in New York City in a poor family on the Lower East Side. But he knew the entertaining life was the one he was meant to follow and started working in vaudeville, where his boundless energy and skill in everything he tried started getting attention. Cantor went on to become one of the original hosts of the Colgate Comedy Hour and was one of the highest paid radio stars of his time. And this week, he's the voice on one of the top songs from early 1924. Here is Eddie Cantor with No No Nora.
In the apartment above me, there is the lovingest pair. I don't know what she has to be jealous of. She has a face that just a mother could love. And still I know she's always worried some girl will steal her prize away. She's always asking, is there somebody else? I guess it's just to hear him say, no, no, Nora, nobody but you, dear. You know, Nora, yours truly is true, dear. When you accuse me of flirting, I couldn't, I love you so. I have chances, too many to mention. Never give them a bit of attention. And would I trade you for Venus? No, no, Nora, no, no. She has a lot of detectives who check 'em up every day. She's read about those men who lead double lives. She's making sure she won't be one of those wives. She thinks he looks like Douglas Fairbanks, although he has been turpentine. 100 times a day she calls on the phone, and every time she does he sighs. No, no, Nora, nobody but you, dear. You know, Nora, that I sing like blue, dear. And when you're speaking of cheating, I I love you so. I see eyes that are full of affection, but I look in another direction. And do I care for the follies? No, no, Nora, no, no. I see eyes that are full of affection, but I always look in another direction. And would I fall for Peggy Hopkins? No, no, Nora, no, no.